Hey folks, if I'm not the first presenter to welcome you to KubeCon China, welcome to KubeCon China. So today we're going to talk about Helm. I'm going to try and do it in 5 minutes because that's what they told me to stick to. All right, so we live in a great world where there's a lot of great software. So we're going to talk about in 5 minutes why you need Helm, what it is, and how to use it. So we have all this great software, and some of it's not necessarily ready for Kubernetes just yet, but we can deploy on Kubernetes in a very flexible way, but that also means that something simple could require a whole bunch of Kubernetes resources. So let's define something simple. How do we containerize an app? Well, we put it inside of a container, but in Kubernetes we also put that inside of a pod. We never run a pod just directly, right? So we have some sort of controller. It's a replica set. But we don't make replica sets directly, right? We put them inside of a deployment. That way we can roll back and roll forward, and we get all those great features of deployments. But if other applications need to use it, then we also need to expose a service, right? So we have all these resource definitions already. And then we probably need a service account to give it some sort of permissions, right, to the cluster, and that's going to need a role and a role binding, and then you're going to get a good config map in order to do all the configuration, and you got a secret, and then you got all this stuff, and then this stuff, and pretty soon you can't see the application anymore because there's all this stuff, right? So it gets kind of crazy. Well, Helm is here to tame all that madness, right? So what is Helm? Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes, right? The idea is we're going to find applications, standard applications like your Redises, your stuff that's sort of off the shelf that everybody uses, that's fantastic and open source, right? We want to share those. We want to use them. How do we do that? We do that through charts. Charts allow us to define applications, install them, upgrade them, roll them back, and it's a CNCF project, so you know it's great. So what do? We take simple parameters, simple variables, and we inject those into complex charts, and then we make powerful applications and we deploy them multiple times on our cluster. How do we install it? It's a client-server model, right? So we can get it from Snap, from Homebrew, from Chocolatey. There's a script in the GitHub repo that makes it really easy to install, right? So how do we get the server? So we got the Helm client. How do we get the server? We type Helm in it. It's that easy, right? In an RBAC system, then we create a service account and a cluster role binding. That gives the tiller deployment permissions to deploy applications on our cluster. Then we just patch it, make sure that the service account in use is tiller, right? So what do we get? We get the tiller deployment, we get the replica set, we get the pod, and we get a service. Now the Helm client can talk to the tiller server over that service, right? So what are we going to deploy? That chart, right? It's all the resource definitions that we need in order to deploy that application. And they're all included, right? You can deploy with very simple commands here. Where do we get them? From a repository. That repository could be private, it could be public, but let's say we're going to use the public repository, then it's very easy to use. So when we deploy that chart, it's going to turn into a release. It gives its own custom name, right? So we can use the chart over and over and release multiple times. So how do we do that? Helm install. Very easy, right? It's going to pull it from that public repository. The most available one is the Kubernetes charts.storage.googleapis.com, very easy to pull from. And we release the chart. It gives it a unique name and a unique identity, full Joey in this case. So how do we control it? A whole bunch of top-level commands to do it. Status, update, list, upgrade, all a bunch of commands. And what is a chart? It's simply just a directory filled with files. It's got a chart.yaml that describes the chart. It's got some other optional files, readmes, and things like that. And under templates is all the resource definitions in a parameterized way that allow us to customize that application as we release it, right? So there's an example of the chart.yaml. It's got a bunch of information on it. I'll leave this for those of you who want to go over the slides at reference. What's the template? It's that resource definition powered by the Go template language. That allows us to inject those variables and deploy that application with a single command. So in almost 5 minutes, why do you need Helm? Well, it couldn't be complicated to deploy something even simple on Kubernetes. What does Helm allow us to do? deploy that complicated thing in a couple simple commands. How do you use Helm? Helm install. Now, beyond 5 minutes, we didn't talk about things like security, multi-tenancy, creating your own charts. You can do that too. Or using a private repository. So stick around because I believe the next speaker is going to be talking about that. Thank you so much and happy helming.